And we're going to go ahead and get started. There may be other people coming in here pretty soon, but I'm going to move that down where I can still see it. And because tonight I really planned, this is kind of case review night or case study night. I usually do that for week 5 of the class and pick a couple of the case studies and have you process them. Now, one of the things that I do is we do the case of Hartley. And if you've looked at your assignments this week, the case of Hartley is one that you are supposed to write about. So one of the reasons I do that is hoping that you'll be able to take notes and that pretty much your paper for that or your response for that case study will be written by the time we get done. So my game plan is that we'll spend 30 minutes on each of the 2 case studies that I've pulled up, and then have a 30-minute Q&A because I'm sure that you guys have questions that you're wanting or needing to ask. So so that's game plan. Hopefully that works for everybody. But let me start off by praying for us. Father, thank you for your presence. Thank you that you do watch over us and guide us, even in those times when we just don't really have a clue what's going on. Thanks that we can trust you. Thanks that you place people in our lives that we can trust. And Father, as we continue to look at how we can be ethical and responsible in this field that you've called us to, just ask that you would search our hearts and help us to know what you would have us do in these situations that can sometimes be really confusing. So we pray tonight together in Jesus' name. Amen. Somebody else is coming in. Hang on. There we go. Miss Emma. So I sent out PowerPoint to you, but it's a real simple PowerPoint. It basically just gives you the pages that the case studies are on. And just a real quick review. This is back from like week 1, but hopefully it's carried through in all of the processing that you've been doing. The steps in processing an ethical problem. We always want to identify the problem, and this can be a gray area, because what you identify as the problem may not always be what your client identifies as the problem. So you need to do some collaborating there and make sure that sometimes you'll be dealing with issues that really your client is not going to have a lot of say-so in, because they're issues that impact you professionally. And so it becomes more your responsibility. But it also, our clients also have a responsibility for what they bring to the table and what they, the values that they hold. And you're not responsible for their values. They are. And they will sometimes come expecting or asking you to give them answers. And we all know that giving them answers is not the way we work. That's not what we do. We help them to discover their own options and answers. So you want to identify what the problem is and what the potential issues are. And as you've been working through some of these case studies, I'm sure that you've discovered that there can be a multitude of issues involved in one scenario that you have to take a look at, and sometimes our clients have to take a look at. You always want to be sure that you are reviewing the relevant ethical codes, ACA and AACC codes. Depending, some of you may be operating only under ACA. Some of you may be operating under AACC and ACA. Seeing how those integrate and how they harmonize with one another and places where they diverge from one another. Excuse me. Then it's important that we know the laws. And the laws are different than the code of ethics. Each state sets boundaries, sets criteria, and it's important that you know what your state's boundaries are. What does your state say is legal and is not legal for you as a practicing therapist to do? And we see that primarily with things like adolescents, working with adolescents, and disclosure to parents as a result of working with adolescents. That's one of the big places that we see it. Sometimes we'll see it with a conflict of values when a client, maybe a client's values conflict with what the law says. And again, a lot of times where you'll see that is in parenting situations. So it's always important to connect to what the law in your state says about a particular issue. I don't really think that there's any time that getting consultation is not a good idea. I can't think of any time that I would process an ethical issue without doing some consultation with my peer team. Just because there are things that I could easily miss. There's always the potential for countertransference or for transference. And so I need to be alert about that. And that usually is not going to be something that I'm going to see necessarily up front, but somebody else working with me could really pick up on something that I've missed. So, so always consultation. And identifying different courses of action. You know, I think one of the places that I see this a lot is with unplanned pregnancies. That sometimes people will, they will have in their mind that there is only one solution. And whether they ultimately choose that solution or not, that is up to them. That's their choice. But it's our responsibility to see that they're aware of other options and how those other options work. So again, that's important for us to be aware of community resources that are available. So we want to always to look at consequences. If this, then what? And again, sometimes people are not, they're so emotionally caught up in a situation that they really haven't thought through some of even the immediate consequences, let alone the long-term consequences. And so that's a discussion that we want to have with our client it's a discussion that probably we want to have in consultation ourselves to be sure that we're seeing potential consequences that might impact the client. So identifying consequences and then choosing an option. The client chooses an option that best fits for them. Or if we're the one having to make the ethical decision, we choose an option that best fits for us personally and professionally. So, so just keeping in mind those steps always when you're, that's just kind of a foundation piece to take along with you as you're considering different case studies and different scenarios, because those steps will get you through the processing. It'll give you a guideline for processing ethical dilemmas and moral situations. And it's not that it's a recipe. What it is a guideline that says, did I think about this? Have I thought about this? Have I considered this? What else do I need to think about? Who do I need to bring in for consultation? So those steps, and like I said, those are from the very first chapter of your Cori text. But it's not a bad idea to just kind of keep those someplace where you can grab them if you need to. Slip them into a pocket, a clear pocket, so that so you don't have to keep copying them off over and over again. Laminate them, whatever you need to do. But those are just good steps to put in your toolbox, to have in your toolbox. Questions about any of those, or have you been using those as you've been working with your ethical dilemmas? Hunter's nodding his head yes. Have you found them helpful or not? You can just jump in. You don't have to.
No, I had to use these today. I had a client who's got an active safety plan.
Okay.
Been doing really, really well, but today she didn't show up for session, which was not like her. I tried to call to see how she was, just to check in, and her phone was off. And so just kind of talking about it with my supervisor, kind of exploring, is this a situation where in our state this would be considered an emergency, and with an active safety plan it is. And so on one hand, it's like, I don't want to create a problem for her where there isn't one already.
Right.
But so we ended up calling her emergency contact, and thankfully after a few minutes they were able to locate her to find out that she was in fact okay, and
Okay.
things went on. But making sure that I went through it, figured out whether this did constitute an emergency contact or not, talking with the supervision, and then documenting, yes, we are reaching out to the emergency contact. Here's why we're reaching out. Here's who I talked to about it, to make sure that I was taking the right step, and that she is an LPC, so I'm not going out. So going through that process and just making sure that my ducks were in a row, and then I'm doing what's most beneficial to my client and not letting that anxiety get the best of me. While I was doing all this, we had a trainee in the room who's going, well, let's just go knock on her door. And it's like, no, we are counselors. We don't go knock on the door.
No.
Settle down. There's a process we go through.
Right. Yeah. So yeah, great example. And I had a thought that went right out of my head. It'll come back maybe. Document. Document, 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 because if you do not document it, it did not happen. So it is critical, particularly in these kinds of situations, that you document exactly what you've done, the steps that you've taken, and the client's response, those kinds of things. But definitely, you want to be sure that you document exactly what you've done. So, good example. Okay, how about if we take a look at the case of Augustus? You've got your book. This is on page 356. And we'll just kind of read through this, and then I'm gonna split you up into groups and let you talk about it in your groups and see what you think. Augustus meets weekly with his supervisor, Amy, for individual supervision. With only 3 weeks remaining in the semester, Augustus confesses to having a strong attraction to Amy and says he finds it difficult to maintain professional distance with her. Amy discloses that she too feels an attraction, but she is sensitive to the professional boundaries governing their relationship. She tells them that it would be inappropriate for them to have any other relationship until the semester ends. She lets him know that she would be open to further discussion about a dating relationship at that point. Even though he will still be in the program, Amy says that she will no longer have a supervisory role with him, nor will she be evaluating his status in the program. So what we want you guys to take a look at and think about and what's appropriate and what's inappropriate about how Amy handles this situation. And also, what about Augustus's responsibility in a situation like this? How does the fact that Amy is no longer his supervisor affect the ethical concerns, or does it? And finally, if you were a colleague of Amy's and heard about this situation from another student or another colleague, what would you do? What would be the steps you would take? So those 3 things I want you to talk about in your groups. See what you come up with, see how many different perspectives you come up with, and what you would tell both Amy and Augustus in this situation. I'm going to put you in 3 rooms, so one group will have 4 in it, the other 2 will have 3, but I think that'll give you, there you go. Give you about 10, 15 minutes to talk about this. If that's too long, let me know and we'll bring you back. 10, 15 minutes, and then we'll do some debrief. Welcome back.
Oh, we're the first ones back. Let's
You were
go.
the first
Here
ones
comes
back.
everyone else.
Yeah, here they come. Yeah, I think we got everybody back now. Great. So, group one, room one. Emma. Who else is in that room? Emma Hunter, Catherine, Kristen. Tell us what you think about this particular scenario.
We thought
Okay.
it was tricky.
Okay, what was
Oh,
tricky?
Got it. You
Yeah,
got it,
that's
Kristen.
okay. What was?
Well, I don't necessarily want to be the spokesperson, but I'll just say that we like one of the things that we kind of took away was that like I'm not sure exactly what the code of ethics says on it. Like we were trying to kind of look that up, and anyone else feel free to jump in and say that. But like a huge implication for it was Amy's responsibility to kind of model what that would look like with a client. So like her sexual attraction to this supervisee, like we kind of talked about like what if that wasn't just like attraction, what if they really connected? Like we tried to play it out like, okay, what if this is like a small town and they just like happen to really get along? Or you know, like is that always inappropriate, always wrong if she's no longer supervising? But it felt like one of the most important things was that like she would need to model or teach Augustus like how to handle that with a client, because it would not be appropriate for him to ever admit sexual attraction to a client or to have a relationship with a client. So that felt like, I don't know if I'm like speaking on behalf of us well, but that felt like what stood out
Okay.
to me anyway.
What could Amy have done differently right up front at that particular instance in the relationship? First of all, is it ethical for her to express feelings for her supervisor or for her supervisee? No. And as you guys have pointed out, it's much the same as with the relationship with a client. And the code of ethics does have some direction for amount of time that needs to pass before a client and therapist can engage in any kind of personal relationship. And those same codes, those same ethics apply to us as therapists. Why would they be different? So what could Amy have done differently when Augustus approached her with this?
Maybe she could have found a new or helped him find a new supervisor if she knew that she did have this attraction to him. Just assuming that it wasn't built over time, right? And it was an initial reaction to the meeting. She could have, you know, not referred him out, but said, there's a conflict of interest here. I think it's best if I'm not your supervisor. Let's find you a new one, type of deal.
Okay. So information like that from a supervisee or from a client might be reason for referring out. Is there anything else that Amy could have done? And that's a good answer. That's a good response. What else could she maybe have done?
I was in the group with Abigail and Austin said that, and it sounded like a good idea, that perhaps maybe bringing someone in, like, so that you're not breaking up a style and trying to learn someone else's supervising style and bringing someone in. But then I was thinking about, not only is it unethical for her to disclose her feelings, it implies that she knew she had those feelings. And so as a supervisor, it was her responsibility to, once she had those feelings, to probably do that to begin with.
Mhm.
Um,
Maybe to have talked to her supervisor.
yeah.
Yeah.
So anyway.
So,
And then,
and-
but
go
either
ahead.
way, you're documenting all of that, whether you're
Yes.
talking to your supervisor or you're bringing someone in to, making it 3 people during the last 3 weeks. Either way, you're documenting, so that
Yeah.
legally you're modeling what should be
What should
happening.
be happening, yeah. And so, responsibility wise here, does Augustus have any responsibility in this? You guys are going to be doing practicum pretty soon. What if you find that you're having feelings for, if you're not already doing it, what if you find that you're having feelings for your supervisor?
I think so. I think that Amy, because her status power wise is higher, she bears a greater burden in
Right.
kind of squashing that or responding professionally to that. But I think that he doesn't just get off the hook because he's the trainee. I
Right.
think that there's some ethical responsibility on his end too, I guess I don't really know how to describe it, but it doesn't feel like he should be completely like he's just a victim in this or
Absolved,
whatever.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. You guys have gone to the Code of Ethics. We've had to read through the Code of Ethics. Do you think we'd give you any excuse for not being aware of a circumstance like this? No, we would not. We would work through it with you, but up front, you guys know that this is not an ethical relationship for you to pursue. So he goes first of all to his site or to his supervisor, which is that's an appropriate thing for him to do. Then her response has a lot to do with how he then moves forward. Where is Amy saying, man, not appropriate, not something that's going to happen. I appreciate you sharing your feelings, but this is not going to happen. That's that's a pretty out there, upfront response to a situation like this. Certainly doing consulting. If Amy did consulting with her supervisor, what do you think her supervisor might say?
I think her supervisor would be very concerned.
Okay, Sheila, and can you talk a little bit
Well,
more about that?
Yeah, well, because, number one, that I'm assuming she went to her supervisor after she admitted it to Augusta, admitted her attraction. And then her supervisor is probably questioning all the work that she's done with Augustus to see if that's been biased or been incorrect.
Oh, I see
And
where that may have come from. Yeah.
And and then also, what has she done in the past? If she so freely admitted her attraction and willing to date him after they become supervisors, you're wondering in your back of your mind, well, what has she done with clients? It's just really questions her all around.
Has this happened before?
Right.
Maybe with a client.
Right.
So,
Hey.
go ahead.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
so I worked in community corrections and it was at a specific male facility a couple
Mhm.
years ago. And there were so many stories swarming around about, oh, this happened a few months ago, or this happened a few years ago. I mean, it happens all the time. And there was one thing that my supervisor said within the first couple days of me working there, and I'll never forget it because it normalized something and almost gave permission for something that sometimes we can't help, but we can help as far as our actions. And it was, I don't care if you're married or not, sometimes you feel instantly attracted to one of your clients, tell somebody right away. You won't get in trouble for it.
Yeah.
This is what the process is. It happens all the time. And we'll just assign that client to another supervisor. And I thought, how smart is that to
Yep.
just bring that out right in the open? That way there's no like, hey, was the process obsolete because you continued in a professional relationship that really wasn't that professional.
Yeah.
So it was kind of amazing in that sense to just lay that out there.
Mhm. Yeah. And that, Crystal, I think is one of the things that helps us to avoid, we're human beings and we're going to have feelings sometimes for our clients. We're going to be attracted to them. Whether it's in a sexual way or a wanting to date way. The other way that we often is we'll find ourselves thinking, gee, if I was not counseling with you, we could be friends. We could be good friends. And so getting that out there in that, okay, this is the relationship that we have, and these guidelines are in place to protect not just the client, but also to protect me. Just real quick, what kind of obligations or responsibility, what do you think might happen with the company if Amy pursued?
Well, in the code of ethics, under I think it's section F3, it says that, right, like the supervisor has an obligation to conduct themselves in a professional role all the time, whether that be socially, professionally, personally, and so on and so forth. And it gets a bit vague after that, but it does state, right, that they do run the risk of whatever they decide to do, right? And so whether they engage in this act that we're talking about right now, she runs the risk of potentially getting fired by her company if they find out and they think it's a complete no-no.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Other risks that you might be aware of for the company? What if this relationship doesn't work out? And Augustus decides that he was sexually coerced or somehow coerced into this relationship. How does that then reflect on the organization and what happens in terms of the organization then? Does the organization have a responsibility to protect clients?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, if he comes back and says I was coerced, and it's a very litigious society. So if he comes back and says, not only was I coerced, I want to sue,
Yep.
then they are in deep trouble.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And be aware that if somebody decides to sue, they're going to sue all the way down the line. They're not going to, or all the way up the line. They're going to sue everybody that they can. They're going to include everybody that they can in a lawsuit like that. And it might not bear any fruition, but it certainly can create a lot of negative impact on the integrity of an organization. So other thoughts on Augustus? we picked this one because you guys will be in this supervisee supervisor role. And it's wise to think about these things ahead of time and head them off instead of getting caught in them. So you always have options. One of those options is not always to do whatever you want regardless. Or to bend the rules so to make them fit your behavior. One of those places to really be on your toes. Yeah, on your toes. All right, let's do, and this is the one you may want to take notes as you guys are discussing this and as we come back and discuss it, because this one I believe is one of your case studies for this week, the case study of Hartley. So we try to give you a little bit of a leg up. Anybody else a post-it note person? I am a post-it. I put post-it notes everywhere. All right, case of Hartley. And this is going to be on page 358 and 359 of your text if you want to open that, if you want to hold that for reference as you're talking. During a supervision hour, Hartley confides to his supervisor that his 5-year personal relationship has just ended, and he's in a great deal of pain. As he describes in some detail what happened, he becomes very emotional. Hartley expresses his concern about his ability to work with clients, especially those who are struggling with relationships. Then you're given 4 options about how a supervisor might deal with Hartley's concerns. And then the commentary, you're asked, do you agree with the commentary that the Corys have come up with regarding this particular case? So in your groups, look down through those options, those supervisory options. See if there's one that you think is more reasonable than the others. Think about some of the challenges that some of these might present, some of these scenarios might present. And then take a look at that that piece toward the end, the conclusions, and see whether or not you agree with what they have to say about the supervisor's options. So gonna split you into rooms again. We keep losing Austin. Time. It'll be about 10 minutes this time because I do want to have some time for Q&A when at the end to address some of your questions. So about 10 minutes this time. And back in. Okay, room 3, that's Carolyn. Peyton. And Sheila. What do you think about Hartley?
Sheila, do you want to share? You had.
Yeah, sure. I
Okay,
mean,
yes.
yes, I'm sorry. Let me unmute. Sorry about that.
Mhm.
I think so it was Caroline Payton and along with myself, and we actually chose the combination of Supervisor B and D. We wanted to make sure that we were not going to be the counselor and that
Mhm.
Hartley didn't come and use us as a counselor, because that's not our role. But we did want to be empathetic to their issue, to his issue. And
Mhm.
so, and we wanted to encourage him to go to get counseling on the outside. So
Mhm.
we actually split between D and B. We wanted to be a teaching moment to say, okay, this is what you need to do when life throws you a curve. This is how you're going to have to counsel when you have bad days. But we do encourage you to go to someone on the outside to delve into that further. So we wouldn't refer him out, nor would we
Okay.
be the counselor for
Okay.
him. For his purpose.
So in blending those two, you come up with something that really can be helpful to Hartley.
That's what we thought.
Maintains the relationship between the supervisor and Hartley, but also sets some needed boundaries.
Correct.
Yeah, good job. Other thoughts? What'd you think about the conclusions that the Coreys drew? Agree with them? Disagree with them?
I think our group definitely agreed with that balance between like the third group talked about balancing between, dealing with the pain, but not becoming the counselor, right?
Mhm.
Dealing with that counter transference issue, identifying how, you work with clients in spite of all this. I think that that last line was really a good one. Having a problem is not the problem. Not dealing with our problem is the
Is the
problem.
problem. Yeah, good
It's
line.
not like, okay, now you're incapable of counseling. It's
Mhm.
how do we help you get equipped to help your clients, even in the midst of all this?
Right. Because we are always going to have life issues that come up. Some of them will require that we take a break, a little bit of a break. But again, that's what supervision is for, is to help with that. Some things, it's the best thing for us to do is to stay in the fray, and attune to what our client is wanting and needing and feeling. So, again, that supervision becomes so critical in processing those things. So a lot this week on what happens in the supervisory relationship. And you all, if you're not already, will be entering into supervisory relationships. And being able to, you have some responsibility in maintaining those boundaries as well, but also you want to be able to feel like your supervisor is listening to you and empathetic with where you are in your life and what's going on in your life. I'm not a good one to talk about this right now. But as therapists, we don't get a lot of sick days. One of the things that I've really struggled with the last few weeks is having to cancel appointments and not being there for my clients. Fortunately, the relationship that I have with all of my clients allows us to be present and work through that kind of thing, and instead of stuffing it or pretending it's not there. We have the opportunity to do that, and they are given permission to be frustrated about me having to miss sessions. It's normal that they would be, and I appreciate their compassion and their concern, but it's also okay for them to be upset because we've missed our sessions, and it's okay for us to talk about that too. So again, that's that being present with where the client is right now. And being willing to be open and genuine and transparent yourself. So, all right, I have a couple of questions for you. If you would respond quickly in the chat, please. And then I want to answer, with the time we have left, I want to answer any questions that you might have. We've got about 15 minutes, a little over 15 minutes. So my two questions for you. One, do you want another virtual session during week 6? So that's the first one. Respond to me, please, in the chat. The second is, are these kinds of processing the case studies, are these helpful for you, or is there something that might be more helpful for you in understanding ethics and kind of getting your own grounding in ethics? There isn't, or at least to my way of thinking, there's not a lot of reason to take 45 minutes to do a past PowerPoint on something that you've already read in the textbook. And so to me, the doing the case studies is seems to be more productive, but just because that's what I think doesn't mean that's what you think. So okay, I'm reading your chat. Okay. Okay. Well, that's the other thing that I could do would be I could set up some office hours next week, and if you want to talk about your paper. Okay, most of you are saying that another virtual class would not be helpful, particularly helpful at this point. So. All right. Okay, how about if we set some, I'll set some open office hours. Are hours over the weekend good for you, or are they better through the week?
I mean, early, since we're supposed to start writing our paper this week, I don't know why some, weekend hours wouldn't be a good idea. So
Maybe some on Friday and a few on Friday and some on Saturday and some on Sunday.
I mean,
And-
I don't want to throw a ton of office hours at you.
And you can
You got
pick.
other stuff going on.
Yeah,
Um,
we're gonna have one of our littles this weekend, and
mm,
but she knows that I have to do work too, so she's usually good with that. That becomes people time. So, time wise is the other thing that I kind of pay attention to. Like this time is like 9 o'clock for me. But it's 6 o'clock for you guys that are West Coasters. So, does that work? Does 6 o'clock work for you? Okay, why don't we, I'll be online. Six o'clock. Trying to think when my last client is tomorrow. I'll be online 6 o'clock tomorrow, 6 o'clock Friday. Then if anybody needs additional time or needs time over the weekend, how about if you just shoot me a text and we'll set it up? Does that work for you? Okay, I'll do 6 o'clock tomorrow, 6 o'clock Friday. And we can talk about your papers, see how they're going. I did look through your annotated bibliographies, and they were looking really good. A lot of times when you do a good job on those annotated bibliographies, writing the paper is a piece of cake after that, because you've got everything right there in the categories of what you need. So, but we can definitely do some talking about papers, because those are always a concern for people. Any other questions that you guys have?
Just to confirm, is that was Pacific time, 6 p.m. or 6 a.m.?
6 p.m.
6 p.m. Well, you never know.
Yeah.
We're all over the place in timing over here.
Let's do a 6 p.m.
Okay.
Although, 6 a.m. would be 9 a.m. my time.
Yeah, same. That's why I was asking.
Yeah, but I also have clients starting to on Thursdays at 8. So,
Okay, 6
so
p.m.
that's probably not
Pacific.
going to work. So 6 p.m. Pacific time, and I'll send out an email about that as soon as we finish. Okay. All right. Anybody else? Thoughts, questions?
So you got a chance to look over the annotated bibliographies. They're looking pretty good. When should we expect to get the feedback on those?
Hopefully, Hunter, that's going to be the first thing on my agenda tomorrow, because
Okay.
to me, that's the most timely piece of the grading. And so hopefully that's my plan, is for that to be the first thing that I grade and respond to tomorrow.
Awesome.
Okay.
Thanks, Amanda.
Sure. All right. Well, thank you all for being here. Thank you all for the prayers and concern that you have sent our way. I certainly appreciate it. And you just never know what's gonna crop up. So it has been good to see everybody. And some of you I will probably see tomorrow evening. So I'll send that email message out just as soon as we get done. Okay. All right. Thank you. Have a good rest of your evening.
Glad you're
Thank you,
feeling
Professor.
better.
Thank you.